Hello, I'm Peter Bell, and I'm here with Mr. Ian Stalker of LSC Lithium. Hello, Ian.
Good morning.
Wonderful to talk to you. First chance, really, to speak with you, sir.
Yes, it is. So I'm looking forward to the conversation, Peter.
I've seen your name pop up in a few places, and I will admit that whenever I've seen lithium, I've kind of ran the other way. But it seems like it might be bad enough out there now to dip the toe in, sorry to say, and then to see all the stuff that's coming down the pipe with LSC here, that is just shocking.
Yeah, look, there's a lot. LSC is busy on a lot of fronts, and I'm sure we'll have the chance to talk about that. But in terms of dipping your toe in the water, if you like, with the lithium market, I read an interesting line just literally a few minutes ago where it said the Austrian government was looking to curtail the speed at which internal combustion engine driven cars drive at, and electric vehicles can go faster. And the guy was commenting that that was a great selling point in Austria. But it's one of many anecdotal points that that London was had an edict out not so long ago that some streets in London will not allow anything else except electric vehicles in them because of the environmental challenges they face. So there's
Yeah.
a lot out there that's telling you that the penetration of electric vehicles, the growth in the lithium batteries as a consequence, and general lithium battery storage, that really this is time for the market. It may be a little bit soft in terms of current pricing, but the demand is there, and when the demand is there, you can bet the market will follow pretty soon after.
Well, and it's our duty, junior mining speculators, to be contrary and come in when things are looking desperate. If there is that longer term macro story that the demand growth and everything is substantial, which nothing has changed on that side as far as I can tell the last few years, despite all the ebb and flow and the excitement. Maybe one pointed question for you here. The supply side of lithium has always been a bit of a concern. I don't really know much about it. And I think there's a lot of rumor maybe and misinformation. Um, any thoughts on, are you scared of trying to be a small player in a bigger market?
Well, no, I'm not, Peter. That's the opening gambit. And the reason I'm not is that it is a small market in general terms. And LSC will have a reasonable size footprint within it. So I don't think we'll be a small supplier. But you're 100% right in that I can tell you whether it was lithium or whether it's gold or whether it's uranium.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier to talk about building projects than it is to actually build them and bring it online. And if you look at what's happening generally, there is in normal circumstances, people are slower at bringing things on than they originally have suggested in their various wonderful reports they put out there.
Yeah.
Knowing that, we've deliberately set our stall out to be, I think, as pragmatic as possible on the time, excuse me, Peter, on the timing of the deliverables for building this plant. And we see ourselves coming online with our first project, because we have a pipeline of projects, but coming on our first project towards the end of 2021, which again goes back into that market scenario of saying, listen, Tesla didn't do as well as they said they would, but they're still selling cars and selling more of them. There'll be Tesla number two, Tesla number three, whoever they are, and that growth will continue. So 2021 end of strikes me as us collecting our and getting our ducks lined up in a row for production at the right time in terms of the overall marketplace. And I think a lot of the would-be's and wannabes just won't be there. I think the difference when investors look at companies, they've got to decide which ones are real and which ones are just paper.
Well, and again, there's a lot tied up with that, right? Um,
Yes.
if we hear most juniors talking about project financing and putting something into production, you just say thank you very much and move on. But
No, you're right.
for you guys, I would pause and take note a little more carefully. Um, and maybe again about this point about just staying with lithium for a long time and through one cycle and maybe out into whatever comes next, right? Um, to be early, sometimes you have to seemingly be late in a way.
Yes, I think that's one of the things that miners don't want to be, Peter, is first off the taxi rank. Because invariably, first off the taxi rank has all the challenges of understanding what market he's getting into, how
Yeah.
his plant is going to perform. and we like to learn from those mistakes. Most of us like to look at something and say we can compare favorably with that. So for us, I think we've got our timing right, and you should be aware, and listeners to this interview, that I've been lucky enough in my career, Peter, to have built from start to finish 10 mines in the mining industry, from resource evaluation through to construction operation, and then finally ongoing production for the next 10, 15 years. Most of them are still in operation because they
Wow.
were big enough mines. So when we put this team together in LSC, it was done deliberately to make sure that we would take this project as far along the line as it was necessary to take it.
Yeah, wonderful. Despite whatever may come along the way.
Correct. I mean, you can never, none of us have got crystal balls, or otherwise we'd probably be in a different job. But what we have to do is do our job correctly in terms of knowing how you do your engineering, how you do your planning, how you do your resource calculation, and then target lowest quartile operational cost. Because at that stage, if you can get to that level, Peter, you can withstand the vagrancies of the market that you're in, lithium in this case, the ups and downs of what the pricing will be.
And some of the discussion that I have heard recently that's been more reasonable to my mind about lithium has been getting away from the salars in general. Do you see that as a probability, a possibility, a good thing for the lithium market in general?
Look, when you're in a market like lithium and it becomes exciting because of the demand, you will always have new entrants looking to come in, and new entrants will come from potential deposits that have never been mined before. The challenge they have is getting that certainty. The salars have been tried and tested. We have been operating lithium operations in the salars in Argentina for a long while now. So it's not us inventing the wheel, it's actually just making the wheel go a little bit faster and a little bit better. So
Well,
no, I'm comfortable with the salar operations.
and to again to several of the things that you've just said is mentioning lowest quartile costs yourself, targeting trying to be in there. Good. Some of the talk that I've heard from other people, broader setting, is some of these new tech sources of production are going to disrupt the cost curve, and oh, there's going to be a whole new bunch of production come in way below the existing cost curve. And then just hearing you say it again, certainty. Right. Sure. Thank you
Correct.
very much for your report that says that you're going to come in 50% below the lowest cost producer, or whatever the numbers are. Um,
Yeah.
that is a very important theme, and 10 mines. I didn't realize it was that number. Congratulations. That's wonderful.
Thank you. And there was a range of commodities, as you can imagine.
Certainly. And to LSC, I would wonder, how did you guys vacuum up, pick up all these projects and assets? There's quite a collection of things in this company.
Well, I have to give credit to the guys that started the company before I actually came on board, Peter. They had the view that, in all our mining scenarios, that being a reasonable sized player is important. Being a small player gets you marginalized eventually. So they went about their work in the early days in picking up a range of properties down in Argentina that ended up with us owning over 300,000 hectares of ground that was highly prospective within the Salar area. And what was most important, Peter, from that collection was that in several of the Salars, we are the sole owner. So we don't have conflict with others in the same Salar that are owning little pieces of this and little pieces of that. It's all doable, but it's much more simpler when you're a single owner of the Salar, and it's much simpler also for local government, i.e. the provincial secretaries of mines, etc., to award operational licenses, environmental permitting, etc., to a single operator rather than a plethora of small operators in a patchwork quilt scenario.
Yep. And I believe you mentioned past timelines and things taking longer than expected. You've delivered two 43101 resource reports this
Yes.
year, as I gather, and reading recent news, again, to come back, what is coming next for the company.
Well,
um,
we have our Pastos Grande resource, which for us will be a maiden resource for that particular salar, and we own roughly about 40% of the salar surface. That will be coming out in the very near future.
Yep.
And I think it's going to be encouraging for us. And the reason I mentioned that we only own 40% back into my earlier comment about being the biggest owner of property in Argentina and being sole operators is it's our intention to take the brine from that portion that is ours and deliver it downhill, I'm glad to say, so I'm not pumping
Yes.
uphill, downhill to our second salar, which is Pozuelos, where we have an existing 43101 on it. And that combination of pastas and Pozuelos is actually an excellent combination in terms of overall economics and a little bit of flexibility in operation that gives us a distinct advantage over our competitive groups.
Yeah. Well, I saw a mention of that pipeline and I had a laugh. I am very glad to hear that it's downhill. Thank you.
Yeah, it's always easier.
Plus 15 kilometers or something it's coming in at. I was trying to wrap my head around that. Oh, God.
Yeah, look, we've in the past we've built a lot of water lines, for example, because water is a key source for all operations. And some of those projects I've been involved in that I briefly touched on, we've had pipelines in excess of 30 kilometers. And so the 15 one, and it's downhill, it's more about delivery to a tank and then let it by gravity flow rather than pumping the most of it. So that's convenient.
Well, and to me, that's just an example of how important it is to get some context around bits of information. You know, the things that we read in the news releases, they're factual and they're correct and they're important, but they're not always the full picture. The little
Correct.
detail of downward sloping, I didn't see that in the news release or the
Correct.
president, but very, very important for people who are looking at this stuff and trying to find what would look like, you know, obvious fatal flaws, right? I feel like a lot of
Correct.
the people that have been following lithium, they're kind of, if they're still following it, they have to be pretty tough, you know, and there's a lot of no, I feel like there's from the smaller, you know, retail audience maybe that gets sold these stocks often on an ongoing basis. I'm sure there's some fatigue. I wonder about with the new resource estimates project and the optimizations you're referring to at that one project with the two deposits, two salars there, project financing.
Well, look, where we're at the moment, Peter, is we are completing our preliminary economic assessment, and that will be out the month of November. As I mentioned to you, the target we're aiming for is lowest quartile operating costs so that we can stand the pain that will come about if there was to be a depreciation in the lithium pricing, but I don't think there will be. And with that PEA, you know, I think we will deliver to the marketplace a very robust set of numbers that will put us in very good position for that 2021 startup. One of the things when you talk about ground truthing the companies and doing comparisons, if you like, because there is there's a choice out there. It's kind of like Air Canada that says, thank you very much for your business and we hope you've enjoyed the flight. It's kind of like that for the lithium companies as well. The reason you come on board is we hope you do enjoy the ride in terms of the investment opportunity. And so when you look at that pastas Pozuelos comparison, most companies won't actually tell you, but a salar tends to be at the sort of lower part of a set of hills or mountains, and it's sort of a little lake type thing.
Yep.
Because a lot of the mountains come right on the lake, there's very little access ground available to put in a plant on its side or next to it. In
Yes.
Pozuelos, we're very lucky that we have a lot of laydown ground. It means the earthworks and the capital costs associated with building the plant are much more robust. And also, it's an awful lot easier to permit as a consequence
Yep.
because you're not disturbing the natural beauty.
Well, and again, subtle, important pieces of information. And to hear you talk about the lay down ground required for an actual mining operation, again, something that people who follow junior mining and exploration stories may not be quite as familiar with as they should be, really. The fact that in the end, these are huge destruction projects, effectively.
Yeah, no. Look, it's true. But we have to do our business, and as a professional engineering company, we have to do it correctly within the rules and regulations that exist. But wherever there's an opportunity to make life easier, we should take it.
And strategic review, I see mention of that in one of the recent news releases. No
Hmm.
details as yet, but it's noteworthy that it is included. Um, is there seems to be some talk around heat in the M&A space,
Yes.
things picking up there. So it's good to see you staking a flag in that. Is there
No,
been?
it was important. It was important that we look at what we would regard as an exit strategy at some stage. And so we started that ball rolling a little while ago. And what's happened, in fact, and the reason that you've kind of mentioned, I think, Peter, is that LSC at the moment is, in our opinion, and I think it's validated by a range of people when you look at what targets are out there on the company's value. We've got 8 Capital saying we're worth about $1.40. We've got Cormac saying we're worth about $1.60, and we're trading at 40 to 45 cents. Because we're trading at 45 cents, we're obviously a natural target because of the relative valuation compared to our peer group
Yep.
in terms of market cap. And that relative comparison, when you start looking at the quality of the assets, is the exact opposite in our opinion. So here we are undervalued, but we think with the best assets driving us towards what we hope will be a better price. But of course, that makes us a target.
And shareholders' rights, is there such a plan in place already, or?
We completed a rights issue about 3 weeks ago and brought just shy of $8 million into the kitty. So right now we're pretty well financed for going forward as a company. And that rights issue, Peter, gave the shareholders that existed the opportunity to some extent of, if you like, getting in at a level and bringing their overall average share price down to something more appropriate.
Yeah. So a couple things in that. Thank you for doing that. Not that I participated or anything, but there's a speech from Rick Rule from maybe 2 years ago, and he speaks about how a rights offering is the most fair way to do a financing. There's some complications around it, but the ability to go to existing shareholders first and offer them a pro rata ability to participate in their placement really negates a lot of the Howe Street gamesmanship that goes on with different financing rounds and stuff. So good to see you doing that as kind of a best practices way of financing the company at a tough time, right? Because with share prices at low value in the secondary market, doing a placement that is a smaller amount restricted to select people, that's kind of a yellow flag or a red flag for some people, right? And to really bring it to the existing shareholder base on an account, a lot of accountability, right? By giving them actual rights and allowing them to participate or to sell the rights in some, additional secondary market for those rights themselves. Is there anything that is a huge thing? I'd love to talk to you about that, but it was also the poison pill that I was thinking of as well. So not the financing, but the shareholder rights plan, which is something that public companies can implement to help them fight off hostile takeovers.
Yes, look, I think that's right. First of all, thank you for that summary, because you're right. That's the way the board viewed it, that it was the fairest way and the best way to ensure shareholders got the opportunity of coming in rather than looking for new shareholders and unnecessary dilution from that base. But we're in good shape now going forward. With all of us took part in it. I personally took part in it because I'm a believer, and it was a substantial part, I'm glad to say, because I think the value is there. So we're now looking forward to the future in terms of the quality of the assets we've got, getting that message over. Peter, we talked briefly about Pastos Grande, but I can also tell you that in the not too distant future, there's a new updated Pozuelos report coming out, which is this blend of the two salars coming into the PEA. And we're optimistic that the Pozuelos numbers will be very encouraging for us and for shareholders coming in. So there's quite a lot of work going on. We're working on the environmental issues. We're working ensuring that where we are building the plant at Pozuelos, we have the infrastructure in place. So, for example, we announced not so long ago that we have locked up the residual gas supply that's available in that part of Argentina to ensure that we have sufficient power and steam available for the plant. And that's a big thing. There is not, Argentina, certainly in the Salta, Jujuy areas, although there's some decent access and some very good people, some of the infrastructure like water, like power, etc., is limited. And so it's important that companies like ourselves lock that up as quickly as we can to make sure that bottleneck is managed properly.
Yeah. Well, and I've heard good balance of coverage here between, servicing the street and looking after interests and issues there, and then on the ground, House Street, and then on the ground in Argentina as well. The exploration camp with 40 people I saw mentioned, and the
Yeah.
list of community outreach activities. Those might just look like black and white text on a piece of page to people, but I suspect that you guys are doing best practices there.
Correct. And they're all part of that package of making sure that all stakeholders are properly behind us and making things happen. You cannot work without local community support, which is why we mentioned it in that press release. And the camp, the reason we put the camp in, Peter, is we said, look, we're still in some areas of our salars at the exploration phase, but that camp has been built in a way that in the not too distant future, it can convert itself to the construction camp
Yeah.
for the next stage of LSC's development. So it was money invested for the right reasons and doing a range of jobs.
Yeah. And gives you lots of runway. Thinking
Correct.
about the potential for production here, and then additional exploration within your own portfolio. That's the benefit of going through these tough times and being acquisitive. You may not have the share price to really be doing a lot of takeovers of other public companies, but whatever you've been able to source privately, again, is impressive. Did any of these salars come from other public companies, or are they all?
Well, they're all ours, Peter, and that's the big advantage of that land
Yeah.
package, because we've talked just briefly about Pastas and Pozuelas, two excellent combined salars that gives us, a very large lithium carbonate inventory in the ground, which is that flexibility I talked about. But we've also got Salinas Grande, which is about 40, 50 kilometers away. And that happens to be one of the highest grade salars in Argentina. It runs at approximately 800. The results we've put out there in the public domain, over 800 ppm, which is about 30 to 40% higher than the average grade in most other salars. We own that one, so that's a great extra advantage to LSC in terms of the range of projects in our pipeline. And then we've got Rio Grande, further down south from PPG, Pastas Pozuelas, and that too has got a resource on it of over 2 million tons. And the big thing about that particular salar, Peter, is that our seismics that we released earlier this year have told us that the depth of that salar can be in excess of 500 to 600 meters. We've only drilled the upper 100 meters. When the drill stopped, we were still in lithium brine grades. So our expectation is that the lithium brine continues to those depths, and if we've got 2 million and 100 meters, then even us guys who are not Einstein can work out what the potential might be.
I was shocked when I saw you talking about seismic and the AMT and everything there, and then I saw the 500-meter number. I was like, oh, okay. Is there anybody else that's talking about that really in Argentina, like at those depths?
Look, there are one or two. For example, just in passing, we also announced not so long ago, Peter, that we had entered into a joint venture with an Argentinian company called Plus Petrol. Now, Plus Petrol are a very large oil and gas company operating internationally, not only in Argentina, but have been in Argentina for many, many years. They know how to work in country, and they regard themselves as operators and builders of projects. Their oil and gas space obviously use seismics and AMTs rather similar to ourselves, which is what attracted them to talking to us. And so the salar that they have come into with us, which is called Arizaro, happens to be a very deep salar as well. We just haven't sampled it yet, but they're certainly a very good partner to have got an association with, and we look forward to not only that joint venture, but seeing what happens going forward in perhaps other areas that we may find of strategic use to both parties.
Yes. Well, and again, to that question about strategic review and what does the future look like for LSC, people love to talk about the takeover potential around
Of
lithium
course.
stories. I haven't really seen many takeovers go down in the space though yet.
No, exactly. It's been very limited. So, I have no doubt there'll be consolidation going forward because there
Yeah.
just can't be lots of different companies. But with LSC being the size it is, it really is an attractive um, project or company, if you like, in the lithium space. Of that, I have no doubt, and neither should your listeners
Well,
have.
and looking back, how long has LSC been putting together land package, as you say, now in Argentina?
Well, look, we started getting involved in 2017, so it's really not a long history. I got involved by about September 2017, so I've been on board for just over a year. And what we've done, Peter, is take that large land package and convert it into real, genuine projects with lithium resources associated with them that's going to continue to grow. So we've moved from just the size of the land package, which was fantastic on its own, to being one of the larger companies in terms of resources today. And as we move forward with more drilling, more information, it could well become the largest resource environment down there.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't realize it was such a recent launch. That's a lot of ground covered in a short period, and uh,
Mm-hmm.
and when you get these big commodity runs, um, it can be frustrating to look back on the downward slope of, as the hot air kind of comes out in the broader market around a speculative trend like lithium. Um, but these waves come in there. It's not just one wave, right? The changes that everybody got excited about the first time there, and they're still has yet to play out, and for years to come. I wonder, also looking back even further, like over your career, have you ever done anything really in lithium before?
No, no, I haven't. But you could argue that one of the other commodities that we did go into, which was uranium, we started a little company called Uramin in 2005, just as the uranium wave was beginning to build up a little bit of momentum, and we got that company sold in August 2007 for $2.5 billion. So it wasn't lithium, but the same sort of small market, um, strategic metal type material that at
Yep.
that time was regarded as what was the future. Because exactly for the same story, in that the world we live in, Peter, has to have cleaner energy. There's no doubt about it. It just has to have it, or otherwise we're all snookered. So we're part of that performance of saying let's be part of delivering what we can in terms of lithium to help that market achieve its goals.
Well, and these salars in general, I'm sure there's most people listening to this would have some, maybe no more than I do about the geology of these things. Maybe a question about that 500-meter depth concept there.
Yes.
Is that, would there be any circulation of that same water, um, at that depth through the surface, or is there something separating them?
No, Peter, that's why we spend as much time as we do on pumping tests to understand rechargeability, to understand how easy it is to pump from certain lithologies within the salar itself. It's not all just a brine solution. There are rocks, there is sand, there is clay. So you have to understand how much you can pump from it in any given period and what happens when you do. So you develop effectively a hydrogeological model, which tells you just the kind of flows you can expect from different areas and what inflow comes in. And you balance that on the number of pump stations you have to make sure that you get this steady state operation to the plant. And that, as I say, the nice thing about salars is this is a tried and tested operation. This is not something that's somebody's got a good idea about. And good ideas invariably take a long while to come into proper efficient operation. This is something that's been done, tested, and does work. So it gives us a big leg up.
And what role does the seasons or the natural rains
Correct.
and all that, what role does that play in all this?
Bang, a great question. The first stage of the lithium extraction is solar evaporation ponds to take the lithium in the brine to a much higher grade before you take it through the process plant. And of course, that has an impact when you start thinking about the snow, the rain, etc. It comes down. So the design takes account of what those weather conditions are, and you make sure that you use the weather conditions that are most appropriate. If you want to be clever, Peter, you could say, look, on a good set of years, here's the numbers. But most of us with an engineering background tend to look at the worst case and design for the worst case, because then you're on the right side of everything. And that's the way we conservatively go about our business.
Well, and you can have an average data point that is representative of exactly no one as well.
Correct. That's exactly right.
So again, the water melts from the snowpack, it comes through and percolates into this solar system, displaces some of the water with the lithium brine mineralization in it. And where does that go naturally? Does it kind of collect there? Is this like close? Yeah, I wonder about the water flows before you
Look,
start mining these things.
yeah, look, some of the snow melt and surface water makes its way into the solar. Some doesn't, of course. They find their own natural discharges in other areas.
Yep.
But the solar is effectively in equilibrium, in a balance. You've already got this denser brine material, and so before it starts displacing that, it's got to pick up lithium en route. So there's a natural balance there that we obviously take into our design criteria when we're building these operations, so that the risk of just exactly what you worry about, i.e. fresh water coming in and diluting it, is mitigated and minimized. It's all part of the extraction, and that's why you choose an extraction amount that is consistent with, if you like, sustainability of the operation.
Yeah. Yep. No, it's financial sustainability operations. It's an essential part of mining. It's a tough business, right? You have to have enough balance in various ways to be able to continue.
100%, 100%.
And looking at Salinas Grandes, wow, a great name for it.
It's a great project, and we own. There's two. It's actually split in two in terms of provincial ownership, if you like. There's a sort of boundary between Salta and Jujuy that goes through that salar. All the ground on the Salta side, we own effectively 100%, and we own about 60 to 65% on the Jujuy side.
Yep.
Again, that prime mover scenario where there can only be one operator, it will be us. And the grade at the upper, I think it's the top 14, 15 meters, is one of the best in Argentina, as I mentioned, over 800 ppm. So when we start moving in that one, I'm going to get very excited as well. But Pastos and Pozuelos was the first, as I say, the first taxi off the rank.
Well, and the size of Salinas Grandes, you're right, this map showing 5 kilometer bars and
70,000 hectares, you're right.
Wow. So,
It's
and
a big
again,
salar.
yeah, and then it's clear that where the salt is on surface there, and then it looks as well like there's some flat ground again nearby.
Yes, there is. There's some adequate ground, and it's well serviced in terms of access to it. So no, it's a nice looking project, and that's again the differential between LSC and a lot of the other juniors out there. We have, if you like, these other projects that allow us to diversify our production profile and allow us to grow it. So although we're talking 2021 for Pastos Pozuelos, we can see Salinas and then Rio Grande coming in thereafter, giving us this nice growth through the sort of 21 to 2025, 26 period, which is, another reason to invest on us.
Yeah. Well, and looking back at Oro Cobre, so this was a public company, and they had a 43101 in 2012 on Salinas
Yes.
Grande. So and I see the note here that you're not treating that as a current historical
Correct.
reserve.
We're updating it. We're updating it, and we've been doing that for the last few months.
Great. It's amazing how many holes. It seems to be a nice setting to work, maybe as well for drilling vertical holes on a flat.
All the salars are flat in reality, so most of the holes are all vertical. But yeah, look, Salinas is with the previous work done in it, the historical work plus our own data, we're feeling very confident about the quality and opportunity that this salar offers us, and so we'll be working hard to get value from it. I can assure you, Peter.
Yeah, and the data that you do generate, good to see all the chemistry and all the important technical stuff here that is essential to having a good reception for lithium story out there. It seems like it's a pretty diehard audience who are pretty sophisticated. I wonder when you start to release some of these new resource estimates, how many people in the world will be paying attention and will be able to really understand what you're talking about.
Well, I think a lot, Peter. I think although we're in a soft pricing environment at the moment for lithium companies, that underlying demand for lithium carbonate is just not going away. And if you have the kind of resources we've got, people will pay attention to it because at the end, it's the quality of the asset and then the delivery of that asset into a production scenario that's important.
Yeah.
And I think we're as well served as anybody out there, if not better. I'm very bullish about our future.
Well, and the exploration side too. Again, one of the pictures in this presentation, and two guys holding a auger drill out there on one of the slars. Amazing.
Well, one of the things we did, Peter, just middle of the year, is we bought what we call our Vibracraw drill rig. So it's our own rig, and it's a nice portable little rig that, depending on the lithologies we encounter, can go anywhere between sort of 3 and 10 meters depth. And of course, as a consequence of that, we're able to pick up a lot of samples in exploration and if you like, guide the bigger, more expensive drills thereafter. So a lot of excitement associated with continued drilling and continued exploration.
And for people who may be thinking that, what these first 10 meters, this is not an open pit mining scenario, right? So those
No,
first,
no.
do you
Exactly.
get water up from these auger holes that you can sample then, or?
Very much so. It's a brine that comes up and you sample it for lithium and all the other chemicals present in it, and you do what's called Packer test to understand the pumpability of this solution.
And I see your team around you. It's a fairly large management team. Or, well, and a large management team in and of itself for a junior doesn't always make a lot of sense, right? But
Correct.
I would point out, it looks like there's a lot of in-country people on this team too,
Very
which
much so.
very
I think that's very
appropriate.
important.
Yeah.
We've deliberately put on board some guys from Argentina, Salta in particular, who have operated lithium carbonate process plants before and lithium brine extraction pumping capacity. So we're talking with people who've been there, done that, and earned the stripes. And that's what makes us, I think, a much more respectable company in many ways. People will understand that the experience in-house allows us to move forward positively towards that production scenario.
And a, a, a full list of, is that 6 board members? Are you on the board as well?
No, I'm just CEO. The board is just a board of 6. So I go to every board meeting, as you can imagine. So it feels like I'm on it, but no, I'm CEO.
Well, and can I ask, sorry, an even number of board members?
Yes, that's just the way it evolved. It wasn't deliberate or planned out. It was just we have a good quality. If you look at the names in there, good quality of people who've been in the industry for a long while, understand the business that we're in, and are just excellent at managing the company at the corporate level.
Yeah. Well, again, some people like lean, mean, focused teams, but I'd rather have everybody pulling in the same direction, right?
Yeah, look, the board's more additive than it is negative. So, I'm very happy with the board. But the key is, again, we did this blend of expatriate management as well as local management, as you mentioned, Peter, down in Argentina. And it's that gets us, because you have to do the work on the ground.
Yep.
And there's no one knows the country better than Argentinians themselves. They've been there, done that, and seen the movie.
Well, and how much is there any disruption to report, from field operations or local politics? Any concerns? It seems
No,
like,
No, we've got a very good relationship on the ground with the 2 provincial governments and the national government. Again, it's areas where we've obviously taken time to make sure that that was the case. And again, partly because of what we just mentioned, our local team are just first class at the local community relationships. And one of the characters we've got working with us, Carlos Garley, was very important, making sure that those communities were on board, because it's not an easy task. They all have their own agenda items for one reason or another. but he got them to come with us, and we've got excellent consensus going forward.
5 employees working full time on social and community engagement at Salinas Grandes. Wow.
Yeah. Well, no, they're not necessarily full time. They're subcontracted in actual fact, so they do work in other areas. But we have a team of people that work there. But fortunately, the salaries in Argentina aren't the salaries that get paid in Toronto or Vancouver.
Well, that's it. And the funny thing is they probably those local, that's a lot more meaningful for that local community, I'm sure as well. San
Of
Antonio
course, of
progress.
course. We are an invited guest as an expatriate, and we have to do things correctly to remain an invited guest. But these guys are part of the fabric, and they understand the culture better than we ever would. So it's us
Yeah.
understanding what they're asking us and using people to help us understand that to get the right mixture.
And looking at the map of the area, what do they call it? The Lithium Triangle, is that?
Yes.
Yeah. So, and everything continues there. No steady, no disruptions. Again, asking about Argentina and all the headline news. It seems like if you watch CNN, you would probably have a distorted view of what this part of the world might be like.
No, I think that's a very valid point. But from our perspective, I can tell you that operationally, working in Argentina is good. There is a transparent legislation, both from ownership as well as environmental and operational demands. So that makes life easy when you understand what it is you've got to comply with and you've got to manage. And generally in country, it's a very positive attitude. Like every other country at the moment, Peter, we've all got our issues, whether it's developed in terms of North America, whether it's Africa or whether it's Argentina. We've all got our own challenges, but no, it's a very stable part of the world and one that you can do business in.
Well, and again, looking at the map, looking from Rio Grande Salar, all Salinas Grandes, a couple 100 kilometers there between your two projects, and then the two sisters in between that,
Yes.
PPP. It really is a nice map of a project area. It's impressive to think that you have such a large land package in the triangle here, really.
No, it is. It's an excellent spread, and that gives us that reduction in risk. Because you can have one project, a one-trick pony, as they say, and sometimes it just doesn't work out for one reason or another. Even with the best guys in the world working at it, we've got, if you like, a pipeline of projects that gives us that little extra reassurance in terms of risk, but also gives us that flexibility when it comes to challenges that you have to face and what else you should be doing to get maximum value for your company and your investors.
Yeah. And so far this year, um, delivery of the two maiden resources again, and the PEA, you mentioned it, 20,000 ton per annum lithium carbonate operation. So anything more that we could talk about there? PEA, PFS.
Well, that's it. It's the PEA coming out in November that I think will encourage us to get moving on the PFS thereafter, with a view to hitting that timeline, Peter, of 2021 for operations kicking in the end of it. And then that's catching that wave of lithium carbonate. We like the PPG environment. It's a nice combination. It's a large inventory when you'll see both numbers. I obviously can't disclose them at the moment because we're still working on final refinement of them. But it's a nice large inventory that gives us that sustainability, guarantee of performance, and if you like, that flexibility when it comes to pumping from one part of the salar to the process plant and from another part of the salar. There's a nice ability for us to flex there, which is something quite a lot of other guys just won't have, frankly.
Well, and the geotech details become really, really important, and then again the evaporation ponds, as you've just the space that you need to have all
Correct.
that.
Correct. You're 100% right.
And is that an inaugural PEA here?
Yes, that'll be our first maiden PEA on that project.
Okay. And
Looking
is there,
forward to it because we're feeling bullish about it, Peter.
well, I would think so. Is there anything else quite like it with the two solars and the pipeline going from the one uphill down to the other? Anything else quite like that in a PEA anywhere from in the world?
No, no, most people, all solars are different, um, similar in some ways, but different in others. So they are individual, and it's that blend of the two that gives us this nice flexibility. So I'm not aware of anyone else who's doing that.
And again, thank you for including in the presentation deck kind of like a Gantt chart or something like that that puts out a timeline of goals, looking forward all the way out to 2024. And, it's great to have that statement of intent. Whether or not able to stick to that, it's a long time out, right? But
It,
to
it is, it
that,
is, but I think it gives people a view of what we're trying to achieve.
well, and most juniors I find aren't willing to really put precise statements of what they'd like to be doing really in 5 years from now. It's there's a lot of questions with exploration projects around what comes next week. But that's, again, this is pre-development stage, I might call it, for LSC.
Yep. No, there's a lot to be done, and there's no doubt, but we are very keen to get on with it and make our future as positive as we can for, as I say, for ourselves and our shareholders.
And for people that might want to look into details on individual drill holes and stuff like that, it's kind of beyond me, all the geochem that comes up with interpreting the assays, and really the fact that it's the pump and these pump runs that you really have to have information on to understand
It's the
economic.
whole range, it's the whole gambit of lithium grades from top to bottom, the lithologies that are appropriate for those lithium grades that you've identified. So it's like your core, if you imagine a hard rock mine, understanding what kind of material you're dealing with, but understanding in this case how easy it is to pump and how sustainable is that pumping. And then that all comes together in this hydrogeological model, which reflects grade, reflects chemistry, because there are impurities present. It all comes together into that hydrogeological model. You move forward into your study and says that's the sort of production level you should be aiming for, and that's the sustainability of it going forward. So, yeah, it's interesting. And yet, but again, Peter, let me just leave by saying it's a tried and tested operation. So the one thing that people can get comfort from is knowing this is not a brand new show. This is something that's been tried and tested many times.
Yeah. And to that, is there anything that's apparent as a major impediment for either part of PPG, in the development pathway?
No, no, we're feeling very bullish about what we've seen to date and what the information that's coming together tells us. So no, look, nothing's easy. And we shouldn't finish this interview by even leaving the suggestion that it is easy. But if you do your jobs correctly and professionally, then the answers will be what you want at the end of the day. You will get a performance that allows you to produce lithium at an economic level and an economic cost that will give a return on investment. And that's what we're here to deliver.
Yeah, certainly. Well, Mr. Ian Stalker, President and CEO, LSC Lithium.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.